Hello everyone, and welcome to Cabin Check-In, Day 2 of the Microsoft Entra Suite Summer Camp. I'm Laura Virengo, Product Marketing Manager on the Microsoft Entra team, and I'm your host for Summer Camp this week. We have lots of amazing webinars lined up for you this week. If you missed the first session yesterday, I highly recommend viewing it on demand. In our camp kickoff, fellow camper Caitlin Murphy was joined by Forrester analysts to uncover the findings of the recent Total Economic Impact Study for the Microsoft Entra Suite. Today, we're joined by fellow campers Reed and Anton to showcase our first set of demos covering how the Microsoft Entra Suite enables you to ensure least privilege access for your workforce. And don't forget to stick around till the very end of each webinar, where we will host a campfireside chat to answer your questions with our product experts. If you have any questions throughout the session, please leave them in the comments and we'll answer them live at the end of the webinar. Before we get into today's demos, let me provide a very quick refresher of the Microsoft Entra Suite. The Microsoft Entra Suite is a complete Zero Trust access solution that empowers your workforce to securely connect to any cloud or on-premise app, resource, or AI within your corporate network or from the open internet. If you joined any of our other sessions, you'll know that the Microsoft Entra Suite includes 5 deeply integrated products: Private Access, our Zero Trust network access solution; Internet Access, our identity-centric secure web gateway; ID Governance, our IGA solution; ID Protection, our machine learning-based identity threat protection; and lastly, Verified ID, our privacy-respecting identity verification. Throughout our sessions this week, we'll showcase new features now available in Microsoft Entra. If you want to learn more about these new features, be sure to check out our new Microsoft Security blog linked here on screen. Now, without further ado, I'll pass it over to Reed to kick off the demo.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everyone. I'm Reed Schroedel, and I'm here with Anton. Before we jump into the demo, let's ground ourselves in a challenge that nearly every organization faces: managing access when employees change roles. Did you know the average organization spends 110 minutes onboarding or provisioning access for just one employee? Multiply that across your workforce, and it adds up quickly, resulting in a major drain on time and resources. And when someone changes roles, the process is often manual, delayed, or incomplete, leading to over-provisioning, security gaps, and frustrated users. That's where Microsoft Entra Suite comes in. Today, we'll show you how Entra helps automate employee governance, ensuring the right access is granted at the right time, keeping your workforce secure without losing productivity. In our demonstration, we will follow Violet, a dedicated and experienced professional at Woodgrove Bank, who has just been promoted to Finance Director. The new role brings expanded responsibilities, including managing a finance team, accessing additional systems, and meeting stricter security and compliance requirements. Once she is established in her position, we'll explore how Violet prepares for upcoming business travel by submitting an access request on behalf of one of her employees using ID Governance. Let's dive into the demo to see these capabilities in action. On her first day as manager, Violet opens My Apps to request access to her new manager resources. She clicks the My Access portal, her one-stop shop for managing access to resources and applications across the organization. The system is intelligent. It automatically suggests an access package tailored for the finance leadership team. No searching, no guesswork. This package includes secure access to a combination of groups and teams, as well as cloud services like financial analytics dashboards and on-premises tools such as ERP systems, all necessary for her day-to-day decision-making. She reviews the details. Everything checks out. Now it's time to request access. Before her request can be completed, Violet is prompted to verify her identity through a quick face check. It's a simple step, but a powerful one. Face check uses biometric verification to ensure that the person requesting access is truly Violet, and not someone impersonating her. Face check is a premium capability of Microsoft Entra Verified ID, powered by Azure AI Services. FaceCheck adds a critical layer of trust by matching a user's real-time selfie and the photo on their verified ID, which can come from a trusted source such as a passport or driver's license. By sharing only match results and not any sensitive identity data, FaceCheck strengthens an organization's identity verification while protecting user privacy. It can detect and reject various spoofing techniques, including deepfakes, to fully protect your users' identities. This additional layer of identity assurance is critical for high-privilege roles, especially in sensitive departments like finance. With her identity confirmed, Violet is granted access. She will now have access to groups, SharePoint sites, and applications, all requested from a single, secure location. No lengthy approvals, no separate portals. This unified experience empowers her to get started right away, whether she's reviewing global budget forecasts, approving purchase orders, or collaborating with other directors on strategic initiatives. It's secure, it's compliant, and most importantly, it just works. A few weeks later, Violet is preparing for international travel. She knows she'll be offline more than usual and wants to ensure key decisions don't stall her in her absence. Using the My Access portal again, Violet requests access on behalf of her colleague, Ward, a member of the extended leadership team. She selects the Woodgrove Finance LT team, giving Ward the ability to access critical tools while she's away. This is modern identity governance in action. Secure, intelligence, and built for how today's leaders work. In just a few minutes, Violet was able to discover and request the right access for her new role, prove her identity quickly and securely, begin working with new applications, groups, and teams, and delegate access without sacrificing security. Now, let's pass it over to Anton to see how these workflows were configured in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center.
Thank you, Reed, and hello from my side. I'm Anton Stajkov, Principal Product Manager in the Microsoft Entra Engineering Product Group. And now that we have seen how easily Violet was able to get access to the most crucial resources on her first day as promoted manager, let's take a look what was needed by the Woodgrove Finance Administrator to configure all these features in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. First, we want to make sure that Violet can request access to the new resources she needs following her new role change to a manager. Lifecycle workflows in Microsoft Entra make it super easy to automate common processes during the user's lifecycle. We sign into the Microsoft Entra Admin Center, make sure that we have at least the Identity Governance Administrator role. This will allow us to navigate to ID governance and look for lifecycle workflows. Under the lifecycle workflows, we have configured a special workflow that will action when a user moves from individual contributor role to become a manager. This is the Onboard Woodgrove Finance People Managers. This lifecycle workflow is super simple. We have 3 tasks to be executed when people get promoted. First, we add these users to a Woodgrove Finance group. This is a security group giving permissions to all base resources every people managing our organization needs. Next, we revoke all refresh tokens. This is important to make sure that we don't have any stale access to previous resources and to make sure that all the new access is granted. As last, we run a custom task extension. This custom task extension triggers an Azure Logic app. It is a powerful extensibility for lifecycle workflows that allows us to connect to external systems. For example, we can create a ticket in IT Service Management System to trigger a procurement new device for our user. Under the execution conditions, we configure what events will trigger our workflow. In this case, we have selected our workflow to be triggered when a user is added to a security group. Under scope details, we define which exactly security group will be monitored for changes to trigger our workflow. What is so special about this security group? Let's take a look. It is a dynamic security group, and we have created a special rule to be evaluated. Based on the results, the users will be added or removed of this security group. Because in Woodgrove Finance, we source all our identity data from HR system of record. When people get promoted, this is reflected in the HR system. Data is also updated in Microsoft Entra. And within minutes, this user becomes member of the security group and our workflow will get triggered. Going back to the lifecycle workflows, we can browse through the version history. The version history allows us to track any changes that has happened to our workflow. Maybe some administrator added a new task or disabled a task. Maybe someone changed other properties of the workflow. Here we see everything. And within the workflow history, we can see all the executions for all the users of the workflow. We can see if the execution was successful or not. We can troubleshoot if there are any errors. And we also can see which version of the workflow was used during the respectful execution. We use lifecycle workflows to automate identity lifecycle tasks. Now let's change gears and check the entitlement management, where we can define packages and rules to govern access to cloud and on-premises resources. Under entitlement management, we have the catalog sections. We use catalogs to group different resources together and delegate entitlement management for those resources to the respective individuals. As we can see on the screen, these resources may be Microsoft Teams, security group, applications, or even Entra administrative roles. Here, one security group needs particular attention: old growth mainframe users. As its name suggests, this security group existed before Microsoft Entra was there, in the times of mainframe. In old growth finance, we still run our mainframe and we still manage the access to this security group. Originally, this security group was created in on-premises Active Directory. With the newly introduced feature, however, we can change the source of authority of a security group and make it completely manageable and governable from cloud. This allows us to have a single cloud tool to manage access to resources on cloud and on premises. Let's verify that this group really has changed the source of authority. As we can see from the audit log, someone in July changed the source of authority from Active Directory to cloud. And now we can use entitlement management to strictly govern who gets membership for this group, under what circumstances, and when they got revoked. You can think of an access package as a collection of resources built together to add permissions for your employees. Within the access packages, we configure the precise roles for all the resources that we need to give access. For example, if a user is going to be a member of security group or they're going to be an owner, if a user is going to have a read-write access to an application on only read access. The access packages gives us the ability to bundle entitlements together and give the employee all the resources they need to perform their daily duties as a member of a certain team. We configure the rules for granting and revoking access via a policy. The same access package can have more than one policy targeting different users or applying different rules to meet different compliance requirements. Because this particular access package gives access to highly confidential financial reports, we will force additional checks during the request. Under the requests section, we configure requirements for presentation of verifiable credential. Remember when Violet was asked to present her verifiable credential, make this selfie to make sure that she is living in front of the mobile device before the access was granted. This is configured here. Here we also see another setting. Allow managers to request on behalf of employees. Remember when Violet was going for extended vacation and she wanted to make sure all the duties will be performed for her stand-in. She chose to get an access forward while she's on vacation. Here, we configure this setting. One last thing that we must configure to make sure that our processes comply with the financial industry regulations is in lifecycle. Under the lifecycle of the policy for an access package, we configure the period for which we will give access, initially of 180 days. Of course, we can also allow the employees to extend this access. And also remember when Violet was requesting access forward while she was absent, she chose the specific timeline for which she wants this access to be provisioned. This is the setting where we do this. Also, under advanced settings, we can allow the users to extend their access. Even if we give for 180 days, they can also extend it later. Last thing, the access reviews. Access reviews allows us to configure continuous reattestation of the access. Because our industry regulates, every employee with access to financial data must reattest on a monthly basis that they still need access. We configure this with access reviews, say monthly, and then let the employees certify for themselves. Of course, to go even stricter with this regulation, we can remove access automatically if the employees do not respond. And this is not bad, because when employee comes back and needs their access, they can still go back to my access portal, request this access, and everything will be granted again in a matter of minutes, as we saw with the case of Violet. To summarize, we just saw how easy it is to configure lifecycle workflows, automating tasks when employees come to our organization, change their role, or even leaving our organization. Back to you, Reed.
Thanks, Anton. Now, let's quickly recap what we covered today. We started with a common challenge: how to ensure the right access when employees change roles. Then we followed Violet's journey as she transitioned into a new role and saw how Microsoft Entra helped streamline that process from end to end. We saw how the Microsoft Entra Suite allows automated lifecycle transitions using lifecycle workflows and suggested access packages. You can eliminate manual steps and ensure access aligns with role changes automatically. The Entra Suite empowered access delegation when entitlement management let managers, like Violet, request access packages on behalf of others, making delegation simple and secure. We saw high assurance identity verification, leveraging face check with verified ID to ensure the user trying to access a resource is who they say they are. Before we close, I want to highlight the broader impact these capabilities can have on your organization. According to the latest Total Economic Impact study, organizations using Microsoft Entra Suite are seeing significant gains in both security and efficiency when deploying the Entra Suite. In fact, they're seeing a 40% reduction in unauthorized privileged access, helping reduce risk and improve compliance. An 80% reduction in provisioning task time, cutting down from 90 minutes to just 18. These are the kinds of outcomes that are possible when you automate employee lifecycle and enforce least privileged access controls with the Microsoft Entra Suite. And our amazing teams here at Microsoft and our partners are here to help you unlock these benefits for your organization with Microsoft Entra Suite deployment support across every step of your journey. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into ensuring least privileged access. We'd like to now pass it over to Laura, who will kick off the live Q&A. Time to ask Microsoft anything.
Thank you, Reed and Anton. Those demos were awesome. Before we jump into our fireside chat, I'll quickly highlight a few resources. Our new Quick Start Guide will give you all the steps for leveraging the Microsoft Entra Suite to secure least privilege access for your workforce. You can also get started with a free trial of the Entra Suite, and don't miss our new Total Economic Impact study to learn more about the Microsoft Entra Suite value. And of course, summer camp continues throughout this week. We hope to see you in our next webinar tomorrow, Trail Tip, to see how the Microsoft Entra Suite enables you to secure access to any app, from legacy to AI, with no VPN needed. And now, let's get your questions answered by our product experts in our Campfire Side chat. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. We hope you all enjoyed our great demos. And now I'm joined here with my fellow campers to answer all your questions. Before we get into our introductions, I'll remind everyone to please post your questions at the aka.ms URL below. That's aka.ms/campquestions/leastprivilege. And with that, let's get into some introductions. So again, I'm Laura Virango. I'm your host for summer camp this week. I'm a product marketing manager on the Microsoft Entra team. I'll pass it over to Alexander.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, hey everyone, Alexander Philippine, my name. I'm one of the product managers working on Microsoft Entra ID governance and excited to answer some of your questions today. Reed, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Alexander. I'm Reed Schrodel. I'm also a product marketing manager on the Entra team, and excited to answer any questions. Anton?
Hello from my side. I'm Anton, Principal Product Manager in Microsoft Entra Product Team, and I'm happy to answer your questions this evening.
Awesome. With that, let's go see if we have any questions to kick us off. Let's get started with this one here. I know today we followed Violet's journey as she got promoted to a finance manager. We have a question for all these ID governance features we took a look at. Are these only available for employees, or can guests and external users use these as well? Maybe Reed, you can take that one.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. That's a great question. And Microsoft Entra ID Governance is able to support both guest and your workforce. So it helps ensure guests have the right access to the right resources. We actually recently released a new ID governance for external ID meter, which I'm sure we can put a little bit more information or a link to in the chat to provide everyone details on that. But as you know, governing guests is critical, and not governing them can create additional risk. And with ID governance, you can ensure you can govern new guest users automatically, make sure they have the right access using lifecycle workflows, entitlement management, access reviews, and privileged identity management, plus clean up existing guest access by converting your ungoverned guests to governed. And lastly, you can run access reviews for inactive guests to maintain a secure and compliant environment. So this enables your organization to confidently collaborate across boundaries while staying secure.
Awesome. Thanks, Reed. And yeah, we just have the URL up. If you'd like to learn more about ID governance for guests, please visit aka.ms/Entra ID guest governance. With that, like I mentioned, we saw how Violet got promoted. Another question we've gotten is, how does the Entra Suite handle lifecycle workflows when a user's attribute, like their title, changes via the HR-driven provisioning? Maybe Alexander, you can take that one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, with Entra Suite we integrate seamlessly with the various HR providers, right, to get these attribute updates in. So we have native integrations with Workday and SAP SuccessFactors, and then we also recently brought our API-driven provisioning to general availability that allows you to integrate with a lot additional HR systems. But yeah, crucial first point is making sure that these attribute updates are flowing from your system of record into Microsoft Entra, and we provide the right tooling for that. Now, once these updates in terms of department, job title, etc., are flowed into into Entra, that's where our identity governance suite can kick in, and all the features can light up there, right? And I don't want you to think about like a single feature when it comes to that. I want you to think more about the types of access that you have in your organization, right? There is attribute-based access where you very particular know because someone is in a certain department or because they have a certain job title, then certain access is needed, right? And we can automatically adjust this access based on the attributes, either with our auto assignment policies, entitlement management, as well as the dynamic groups. It depends a little bit on what requirements you have, right? If it's very straightforward, dynamic groups might be a good fit for you. In auto assignment policies, for example, we can delay the deprovisioning of the access rights, right, for a certain time period, for example, or we can invoke our custom extensions to embed additional business processes into it, right? So depends a little bit on your business requirements when you have, when it comes to attribute-based access, right? And then, of course, we also have with lifecycle workflows the capability to start mover workflows when these attributes change. That's also helpful to adjust some of the access rights, but I would think about it more as adjusting some of the ad hoc based access that was granted, right? So for example, removing all the access rights that someone has accumulated in their old role, right? And just saying, okay, let's get rid of all of that, right? Let's start from zero from a least privilege perspective. And it's not just the ones that they got from attribute-based rules, but also the access that they have requested on an ad hoc basis, right? So that's where lifecycle workflows can help with adjusting these as well. And of course, lifecycle workflows can also help you beyond the adjustment of the access rights with any additional aspects, like, for example, if you want to send certain notifications to the manager or the user themselves, right? That's where lifecycle workflows can also help you. But generally speaking, bring the attributes in, think about these two buckets of access, right? The ad hoc based requested access as well as the attribute based access. And then we have the right tooling in our governance offering to help you on both fronts.
Awesome. And kind of a follow-up question to that is, how can I map employee attributes to dynamic group memberships?
Maybe I can take this one. And it's a great question, and it's a segue to more identity governance processes. Dynamic groups are the simplest and the most easy way to start up with automatic provisioning of permissions. Microsoft Entra ID supports simple expression language that you can configure simple rules to match user attributes to particular values, and based on the result, the membership is calculated. As we saw in the case with Violet, we use inbound HR provisioning. So the HR system updates users' attribute. This is updated in Microsoft Entra. A couple of minutes later, the group membership is recalculated, and we have these memberships updated.
Awesome. Before we move on to another question, I want to remind everyone that these sessions will all be available on demand. So if you're looking for the slide decks, want to watch the demos again, you'll be able to see them all in streaming on demand after this summer camp week. So next, we'll have one for Reed. Reed, one question we got is, can I only grant access to M365 apps?
A good question, and the answer, no, it's not just M365. Entra ID, ID governance goes far beyond M365. It supports governance across your entire ecosystem. SaaS apps, on-premises, custom-built applications, all of that. So using access packages and entitlement management, you can define policies that govern access to any of those apps integrated with Entra, which means you're not just securing Microsoft services, you're applying consistent governance across everything your users touch. So whether it's a cloud-based CRM, a legacy HR system, or a custom finance app, ID governance helps ensure the right people have the right access.
Awesome. Okay, we got kind of a more practical question. Maybe this one's for Anton. So someone comments, we're trying to enforce least privilege. What are some common mistakes we should try to avoid?
Excellent question. And I wouldn't call mistakes. I would call areas that we often oversee while trying to build our most robust least privilege access model. It's important to understand that least privilege is not a one-time task. It is an ongoing journey, and it is the foundational pillar of zero trust security access. So step out of the box and think about what we really need to implement, thinking about least privilege access. One thing that is very often overseen is guest users or business-to-business guest users in your organization. Well, using the Microsoft Entra ID governance features, you can govern these guest users, you can put controls, how the users get in your organization, how they get out, and even automatically clean up your inactive guest users. Very often forgotten or unforeseen situation in your organization. Another one is, for example, recertification. A lot of small or medium-sized organizations think that recertification process only applies when you are in a regulated industry or when you must comply specific regulations. But applying recertification with access reviews actually helps you reduce stale permissions, inactive entitlements, or maybe even employees that are no longer working for you. So remember access reviews. When we were configuring the access package for Violet, we had an option to configure access review. And I was explicitly going one step further with the access reviews. If people do not respond, the access review process can remove their access automatically. Again, it is nothing bad in removing the access. At least we strive for this privilege. Everyone can go back again to the My Access portal and request the access package. It will be granted. In a matter of minutes, they will restore the access.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, another question's come in. How many people can be notified about access attempts or access prompts?
I can maybe take it. I mean, there's some room for interpretation in that question. So generally speaking, right, if someone is requesting access, right, then generally speaking, we would notify the approver that is configured for the access package, right? Assuming that access package has an approval process notified, then we would notify whoever is configured as the approver. Now, you can either explicitly configure certain people as the approver, right? Name them in the configuration, but you can also reference a group, right? And then everyone that is in that group, in that approver group, would get notified if an access request gets submitted. Similar, we have processes in the approval process where at certain time thresholds, we can escalate the approval, right? So that if the people initially didn't respond, for example, let's say it's a dynamic approval where we look for the manager of the person who has requested access and the manager doesn't respond, right? We can escalate after a certain time frame to the skip level manager of that person that has requested access, right? So we have this concept of an escalation in the approval process. That's all for a given approval stage. And then, of course, we also have multi-step approval processes. So we support up to 3 approval stages in access packages when access requests are being submitted. Now, there was a little bit of room for interpretation in that question. Anton, I'm not sure if you have some additional take on this. If not, we'll wait for some follow-up questions if that was the wrong interpretation from our side.
Awesome. Yeah, and again, feel free the URL below if you have additional questions, aka.ms/campquestions/least privilege. Okay, now moving away, I know we answered a lot about access packages. We got a question, how can Entra help us prep for a compliance audit?
Yeah, I can take that one. That's an important question. And Microsoft Entra Suite and ID governance, which is part of the suite, is built with audit readiness at its core. It can help your compliance efforts for internal reviews and external audits. With Entra, you can automate and schedule access reviews for groups and applications. And these reviews generate detailed audit trails that show who had access, who approved it, when it was reviewed. All of this is critical for demonstrating control over that sensitive data. Another example with entitlement management, you can define who can request access, what approvals are required, and how long access should last using access packages, which helps create a transparent, well-documented process that auditors appreciate, especially when it comes to enforcing least privilege and separation of duties. Plus, with lifecycle automation, Entra integrates with HR systems to automatically adjust access when user attributes change, such as department manager, employment status, and this ensures access stays aligned with role changes, reducing the risk of lingering permissions. All this shows up in our comprehensive logging. Every access request, approval, denial, and change is logged. These logs can be exported or integrated with SIEM tools for centralized monitoring and reporting, which makes it easier to respond to auditor queries and demonstrate your compliance posture.
Awesome. Okay, now I wanted to get into, I know we covered a couple of announcements of new features during summer camp this week. So I wanted to dive into one of them. Maybe Alexander, you can take this question. How does group SOA impact the management of legacy security groups that were previously synchronized from Azure Active Directory? Are there any limitations or caveats to be aware of when you flip that source of authority?
Yeah, Laura, thank you for that one. Yeah, so I think for the source of authority topic, right, basically shifting the management or the governance of a group from on-premises Active Directory to Microsoft Entra, it's really important to start thinking about why am I doing that and like what is the group used for, right? So let's start with understanding what is this, like a group at the end of the day is just a friendly helper, right, to govern access somewhere. Usually that group is referenced in some business application, right, that is used by my end users. And that's really what it's about, governing that access to that application that the group is powering the access rights in. And so the question is mostly starts with understanding where is this application in their journey, right? Is it that this application will stay for several months, years on the on-prem side, and we just need, in quotes, we just need to put good governance on that group memberships, right, and that application, then it's really a story about, hey, we are shifting the source of authority to the cloud because we want to govern that group membership and that application access in a secure manner, be it with access package, access reviews, lifecycle workflows, all the features that we heard about earlier, right? They can help us with access governance needs. So we might just want to apply that governance to the group in the cloud and bring it down to on-prem where this application continues to live, right? So that's one journey where I'm making it clear for myself, hey, I'm shifting the source of authority because I have governance needs that I can solve with the tooling that I have in Entra, and then bring the updates of the memberships down to on-prem AD. So that's one part to the puzzle. And then the second one is maybe that application has actually undergone its modernization, and the application is moving from being hosted in on-prem and authenticating or using on-prem Active Directory as authentication mechanism, and it's moving now to the cloud, to Microsoft Entra, using modern authentication, right? Be it SAML or OpenID Connect, or OAuth for authorization, right? Like if the journey is that this application has moved to the cloud, then I probably just want, in quotes, transfer the membership, right? Make sure I can govern that from the cloud as well, and minimize my AD footprint, right? Like I no longer need this group in AD. The application is no longer connected to on-prem AD. It's now connected to Entra, so I don't really have a need anymore for the group to be there, right? So in that case, I flip the source of authority, but I no longer need the group on-prem. I just manage it in the cloud. So that's the main difference we have to keep in mind, right? Am I doing this because I want to govern from the cloud and keep the group and the application in on-prem AD for some time, because maybe the modernization of that app is a year or 2 years out? Or have I already undergone that modernization with the application, and this is really my final switch to fully modernize the application, not just that it's running in the cloud, but that it's also governed via cloud native technology, and I can minimize my AD footprint. So you will find the same guidance in our public documentation, where we talk about these two different approaches, or these two different drivers. And I think that's the key for the source of authority story, right? Like being aware, why are you doing this? For which application are you doing it? And then from there, develop your journey. Of course, there's an aspect to it in terms of testing, right? Making sure that you go through this process, test and verify. But understanding the why, that's really the key to your for the source of authority feature.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks. That was such a great explanation of it. I know this is a feature that a lot of customers are very excited that is now available. Just to paint a little bit more clarity on group source of authority, Reed, can we just clarify for anyone watching, like how licensing works? Is it part of ID governance? Is it part of the suite? Like, how does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So the group source of authority conversion feature it's not a suite feature or an ID governance feature. It's part of the Entra P1 license. So don't worry, you don't have to have the full suite to use this awesome feature. But to really capitalize on, to use some of the advanced governance features, such as access reviews for that security group, or assigning that security group to a access package, and including lifecycle workflows, that's all part of the ID Gov license, or the Entra Suite license. So really, if you should evaluate your needs and choose the appropriate licensing based on what you need, and talk to Microsoft reps to walk through that discussion. Plus, if you have any questions on licensing, or you want to look at something, we have extensive documentation in our Learn Docs on ID governance licensing. And you can also go to the Entra pricing page for a detailed breakdown of what's included in the individual SKUs, as well as the full Entra Suite license.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Maybe Anton, you can take this one. How can I grant access for just a specific person via Microsoft Entra ID?
It's an interesting question, and it leaves room for elaboration, guessing, but I'm sure we can address the requirement here. First, what is individual person? I am an individual person. Wara or Violet is also an individual person. In the demos, we showed and we saw how Violet got an access. Violet is individual person. Now, Violet was able to request this access from the access package because she was targeted by the access package. When we create an access package, we can define who can request this access package. Is it for everyone in our organization? Is it for people in specific security groups only? Or is it just for individual persons? However, I would be very careful defining an access package that targets just an individual user. Usually the user is part of a team that have a common goal or common tasks. It is very few use cases where we really need to grant specific access to specific individual. And yes, we can configure an access package to only allow request for individual person. We can even configure an access package that nobody can request and is only from administrator granted. And we can have a lifecycle workflow following some kind of events. As we saw, lifecycle workflow is triggered and the lifecycle workflow will request the access package from that individual. Alex, can you expand more probably on the access packages or lifecycle workflows? How can we shape, or what should we generally avoid in shaping accesses, especially in this particular case, a single individual person?
Yeah. I mean, Anton, what you said resonates, right? I think it's key to make sure that when you design access packages, right, that they are centered around a job profile or a department, right? Like usually a bundle of access, right? That's what we highly recommend doing. And then of course, either they can be automatically assigned or they can be requestable by the end users. We do recognize, right, that there is a need where sometimes bundling is not possible, or maybe there's a very strict control from a security perspective, right, where we just want to very fine-grained access for your users, right? And then I would argue it's still like you can still make these fine-grained access, make it requestable by your end users, right? That's still a possibility, but generally speaking, we do highly recommend bundling the resources together and making them requestable. And hopefully, the goal would be that with our attribute-based capabilities across auto assignment policies, as well as dynamic groups and some of the capabilities in lifecycle workflow, that you can cover the majority of access that your employees need, so that the individual access that is very specific to a single person is reduced to a minimum. That is the overall goal. I know it's somewhat a generic answer, but like would have to dive deeper into the scenario here. So yeah.
Awesome. Hopefully that was helpful. If not, please leave more comments with more clarity. We did give a very, very specific question on user provisioning to mainframe. So here it says, since the legacy system, I'm very curious to see that we had a group called mainframe during the demo. As far as I know, this is normally handled by a disconnected delimited file connector. So how can we tie an AD group to a group profile?
Anton, do you want to take a step at it? I have some thoughts in mind, but
I can start and you can correct me when I go wrong.
Yes.
So generally speaking, and yes, the name of the group was mainframe. It's an interesting question. So first of all, in Microsoft Entra Provisioning Engine also supports disconnected systems. We have standard connectors like LDAP directories, REST APIs, SOAP APIs, even PowerShell extensibility. You can write your own connector for a system that doesn't speak a standard protocol. Beyond that, if the mainframe allows an API, sorry, I'm not the mainframe expert, but if the mainframe allows any API programmatic access to it, you can still write the connector for what we call ECMA host or ECMA host connector for the Microsoft Entra ID provisioning. We can provision the users, the attributes to this host, and your custom connector will provision the necessary information to the mainframe. Alex, do you have anything to add, or it was?
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I was actually scanning our documentation for the complete list while you were answering the question. But yeah, I mean, if we're talking about mainframe, right, we're talking about on-prem. So the main point that we have is our on-premises application provisioning that we offer, right, where we have our on-prem provisioning connector that you install in your on-premises server. Entra connects to that and basically uses it as a gateway to your on-premises application. Now, when we say disconnected apps, right, like there's a difference, right? Like just because it's on-prem, it doesn't mean it's disconnected. It might still have a web interface or an API that we can reach, right? So for example, with our on-premise provisioning connector, we can reach to LDAP directories, to SQL. But that on-premise provisioning connector that we have, it also has a file-based connector so that you can write files, right? It also has a PowerShell connectors if you want to do something custom, right? It also has a generic web services connector. So generally speaking, we can reach a wide range of applications that are sitting in on-prem, no matter if they have some type of connectivity, be it SQL, SCIM, LDAP, right? Or if they have no connectivity and you would have to write to some files, right? That's also something that our on-premises provisioning connector can facilitate. But yeah, I think, Anton, otherwise you covered it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Now to kind of bring it back to some of the other things we saw in the demo today, we saw how Violet had to do a face check with verified ID to get granted access to that access package. We got a question. So what is the difference between a face check with verified ID versus a different type of authentication method like MFA? Maybe Alexander, you can take that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the main aspect is, right, when we talk about multi-factor authentication, we usually talk about a second factor that is layered on top of a password, right? Be it the authenticator app, be it a FIDO security key, right? Like there's different MFA factors that are involved. But usually these second factors, right, they prove that the user has access to a certain device or a credential, right, as a second factor. They don't necessarily prove the physical presence of the user, right, and the user's liveliness, right? Like actually physical presence, you have some leeway with security keys, right, that require physical touch, but then you're still not sure is the person that touched the security key, right, actually the person that we believe they are. So the very unique fact about verified ID is the liveness check with face check, right, like where we actually take the live selfie and we compare that to the data that was stored, and that comparison ensures us, right, that the person that is requesting access or the person that is accessing the system, right, is truly the person they claim to be, and we have ensured that they are actually present and it's them and not someone else. So that's very critical for high-risk scenarios, right, highly critical resources. That's where that becomes interesting and adds this additional layer on top of traditional strong authentication or multi-factor authentication.
Awesome. To kind of follow up, is face check just used for unlocking a device? Like, what's the difference basically between like Windows Hello, Apple Face ID, or other facial verification compared to face check, or is it just used for specific apps?
Maybe I can take this one to leave you, Alex, a little time to breathe. So a face check with verified ID is an extension to an industry standard based on decentralized identities. While we all have our devices and use the face check or fingerprint to unlock our device or unlock access to an application, the face check in Microsoft Entra ID combined with verified ID is used for high assurance of requesting access, maybe even cross-device access. It verifies the user, as Alex just said. User is there verifying the liveness selfie of the user against a photograph that is saved on the verifiable credential. As Reed mentioned earlier, this verifiable credential is an industry standard and it may be based on government issued ID like a driving license or a passport. The face check does biometric verification between the selfie we are doing in front of the camera and the photo that was saved in this verifiable credential, respective our passport. So it is used for access scenarios and not just for unlocking your device. Important here to notice that biometric data never leaves the device where this face check is performed. Only a certain score is provided to the Entra, score from 0 to 100, to make sure is this real person or not. Score of 0, of course, means there was no person in front of the camera, while score above 80 is highly confident this was really the person from whom we have the photo saved in the verifiable credential.
Awesome. Now let's take a look. Again, I'll remind everyone, if you have any questions to ask us, you can ask it at aka.ms/camquestion/least-privilege. Okay, so another question. So we know we were talking about compliance and audits a bit earlier. Here's kind of a fun topic I know is on everyone's mind. Any Copilot or AI capabilities that we can leverage in these scenarios?
Or maybe I can take that one. So the great news is that Security Copilot is now directly embedded into our Microsoft Entra Admin Center, right? So you have the natural language conversation capabilities of Security Copilot embedded at your hand in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center that can support you in the various scenarios that you have at hand, right? So, for example, there's Copilot skills that could help you surfacing certain audit trails or logs for compliance reporting, right, to help you more quickly and easily prepare for some of the responses to the audits that you might be facing. But it's not just on the audit side, right? The natural language conversation with Security Copilot, it can also explain or help you explain some of the entitlements that you have in your environment, or even the lifecycle workflows that you have there. We also recently introduced the capability where it can help you automate your joiner or like your joiner mover lever processes, and explain to you how you can best solve that with our governance stack, for example, lifecycle workflows. And then, of course, in that natural language experience directly embedded in the Entra Admin Center, you also get a great capability in terms of summarization, right? So the everything that it can access in terms of logs and the reporting that we have available, Security Copilot can do a great job summarizing and simplifying the information that can sometimes be overwhelming for you.
Perfect. Thank you. I know I'm always so excited to see what Copilot can do to help us all out. So I know we are getting kind of close to time. So maybe as like kind of, our final question, does anyone have any like last advice for organizations looking to integrate the suite and specifically ID governance capabilities into their existing infrastructure?
Yeah, there can always be advice here. And one advice is don't overplan. Just start low and upgrade your processes and your environment. Identify key governance gaps in your environment, in your processes. Maybe there is still someone who is manually adding users to your organization, maybe in the on-premises AD, maybe even in Entra. Maybe you have guest users that are not governed, forgotten, they haven't signed in for a while. Maybe you don't have any access review. These are the key points that you can start implementing and gain quick wins. Also, we have recently published a new quick start guidance to be found under aka.ms/quickstart-least-privilege. Next to the guidance, we also developed a Entra Suite workshop. The entire workshop is packed into a single Excel file, and you can find it under aka.ms/Entra Suite workshop. Don't waste time. Start implementing today. Start slow and move faster.
Love it. Awesome. So thanks again to my fellow campers for joining me today for this fireside chat. I think we got some great questions. And if anyone else has any follow-up questions, please leave them and we'll try to address everything offline. And with that, I will remind everyone, please join us tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Pacific. We'll have our next summer camp session trail tip. Again, here's the link if you haven't bookmarked it yet, but it's aka.ms/Entra Suite Summer Camp. And we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks again, everyone, for joining.